My Lords, I declare my interest as a Vice President of the Local Government Association. But secondly, I want to move on particularly to focus on the issues that disabled people face in a building when they are asked to get out of it, either in the event of a fire or even of a fire alarm if they don't know. And I really am looking forward to hearing Lady Gray-Thompson's contribution after her excellent speech at second reading. My Lords, I haven't always used a wheelchair, but I have used a stick and still use a stick on various occasions. And I have to tell you, there is nothing more frightening than trying to leave even a low-level building coming downstairs with a stick with people racing past you. It took probably the second time I had to do that coming out of a building with a fire alarm before I realised I was as much danger to the people trying to race past me as it was to me because of the risk of falling. Over the years, I've been twice in hotels where the fire alarm has gone off in the middle of the night. Once when I was trying to use my stick, the second time because I was in my wheelchair. I had been told to report to the safety zone, which I did. I was told that someone from reception would come up or the fire officers would come up and that they would transfer me to the evacuation chair and take me downstairs. 20 minutes later, I was still sitting there. My Lords, I have to say to you that this also happened to me in Portcullis House about 5 or 6 years ago. And as a result of that, all credit to the House's authorities, that was remedied and there is now a new arrangement. But my Lords, when you are sitting there and you don't know if it's a fire or a fire practice, and you cannot get out under your own accord, it is extremely alarming. So the use of PEEPs, personal evacuation emergency documents, are excellent, providing they work. And I've used them in workplaces, in homes, in hotels and in guest houses. I was in charge of building some new disabled accommodation at Selwyn College when I was bursar there over 20 years ago. And although they weren't called PEEPs in those days, creating a confident document that both students and their friends around them and the college staff understood what the needs of that particular disabled person were vital to them having confidence in being able to evacuate the building in the event of an emergency. The difficulty that we face today, highlighted especially by Grenfell, is that these documents are not in place. And I want to mention that many disabled people are very concerned that the Home Office has appointed the safety consultant, CS Todd and Associates. They've been given a new contract worth over £200,000. This organisation was responsible for drafting and editing a fire safety guide for the LGA that said it was usually unrealistic to expect landlords to put in place arrangements for disabled people to evacuate blocks of flats in the event of emergency. That's an interesting use of phrase, because as we know, my Lords, there were a lot of disabled people in Grenfell, and flats increasingly are being built, so evacuation for disabled people is vital. I especially want to thank disabled campaigning group CLADG, a leaseholder action group led by disabled people, who have decided that they're going to take the Home Secretary to court on this particular contract, and they and Disabled News Service are really highlighting this issue. And it's important to note that 6 years on from Todd's advice, 2/5 of the disabled residents lost their lives in Grenfell Tower because there weren't the special arrangements in place to get them out safely. And whilst the fire service has recognised that that stay put advice for residents in high-rise blocks must be changed, there is no evidence either from government or from Colin Todd Associates that things have changed. And in fact, a further set of advice has been published by Colin Todd on behalf of BSI that repeated this same arrangement. So, my Lords, that is why we need Lady Gray-Thompson's amendments. There is an adage in the disabled world about no decision about us without us. This is fundamental to human safety and human life, and it is vital that the specific needs of disabled people are taken into account in this bill.
I'm president of the Local Government Association, and when in London I stay in a block of flats. I have a number of amendments in this group. Amendment 9 is the most substantive, but my name is also attached to 4A, 7A, 7B and 147A. I was trying not to test the patience of the committee by adding "and disabled people" into every single part of the bill that I could have. But what I am looking for is more specific recognition that disabled people need greater support and protection than they currently have. Because I believe that if it's not specifically mentioned, disabled people will be forgotten, however good the intention might be right now. There are several important parts where explicitly mentioning disabled people would add significant value, such as on residence panels. And of course, there are many types of impairments. We're not one homogenous group, but bringing additional or different knowledge would be useful for a far greater number of people. Listening to the noble lady, Baroness Brinton, and her experience is what disabled people think about every single day. Every building I go into, I automatically start thinking about how I would get out if there was a fire. And the noble lady and I could probably spend most of the afternoon listing all the incidents where we've been left near staircases or on staircases. But my lords, I take my personal responsibility very seriously. I can still get down a flight of stairs in my wheelchair as long as I have a handrail to hold on to. I can do it reasonably quickly. When I was an athlete, I could do it incredibly easily. But as I get older, I know that's going to get harder, and my ability to get out will be more challenging. One time I was in an office block, the fire alarm went off, it wasn't a drill, and there was one evacuation chair, absolutely fantastic. There were 2 wheelchair users on that floor. So we looked at each other and worked out who needed the evac chair the most. So I went down 5 flights of stairs in my chair. Since second reading, more disabled people have been in touch to explain their fears, but also letting me know about some solutions they've been given, which, quite frankly, are ludicrous. And that is why we need to have different things included in this bill. What we often see in situations like this is that the solutions that non-disabled people come up with are very much medical model rather than a social model of disability, and do not take into account a disabled person's reality or their life. It was once suggested to me, not in relation to this bill, but it'd be far easier if disabled people had a curfew so that they went home at night and we knew where they were. I mean, it's absolutely... This was a really serious suggestion, which I'm afraid I struggled not to laugh at. And if anything vaguely approaches this in Grand Committee, you would understand if I push back quite strongly on it. Tagging disabled people is not a sensible solution to this either, because this is absolving ourselves from responsibility of changing how we think about disabled people. We need to be more forward-thinking and, in essence, future-proof decisions that we take. Specifically to Amendment 9, in another place, the Right Honourable Mr Christopher Pincher said the Secretary of State can already consider the vulnerability of residents when making regulations. But, my lords, I don't think that this goes far enough. And I know there's likely to be suggestions about including information in a premises information box. I mean, that's very interesting, but again, I don't think it goes far enough, because we do need to consider the needs of disabled people. And I very much welcome a discussion with the Noble Lord the Minister and the Bill team to think about how we can find the right wording, not by just sticking any of the disabled people at every point in the bill, but genuinely helping disabled people to make it better. In our second reading debate, I asked the Noble Lord the Minister when the Personal Emergency Evacuation Plan consultation will be published. On the 3rd of February, I asked a question for a written answer about this, and the Noble Lady Baroness Williams answered on the 17th of February, and I quote, "Once the views of all the individuals and organisations have contributed have been carefully considered, but in terms of time frame, the Noble Lady stated that that would be shortly." Now, I know, my lords, that shortly in parliamentary terms can be quite a wide time frame, so I wondered if the Noble Lord the Minister would be able to provide any update on what shortly means in this context, because this piece of work would be incredibly useful in terms of helping us navigate this bill. My lords, I'm expecting some sympathy from the Noble Lord the Minister, possibly not much movement, and obviously I'll be taking away his comments from this debate. But I will be returning a report stage with amendments in this area, and I will divide the House in terms of ensuring we have protection for disabled people.